How would you assess Winston Churchill?
We know now the extent of media operations, propaganda operations, everything that they were running in the United States to eventually drag us into that war. And that was his whole plan. His whole plan was, we don't have a way to fight this war ourselves. This war is over. We need either the Soviet Union or the United States to do it for us. And that was the plan, and kept the war going long enough for that plan to come to fruition. And to me, it's a craven, ugly way to fight a war.
What was the motive? That was the wryest smile I think I've ever seen.
Here's something that might surprise you. Ask most people who won World War II. They'll say America, maybe Russia. Britain? Usually an afterthought, a side character. But here's what makes that insane. Britain was the only major power fighting from the first day to the last. America joined late, December 1941, 2 years in. The Soviet Union spent those same 2 years supplying Nazi Germany, oil, grain, while Britain stood alone. And yet, in the story we tell today, Britain gets pushed aside. D-Day, often called an American operation.
Britain waged a brilliant war. It was the only country to fight the first day of the war and the last day of the war, September 1st to September 2nd, 6 years. No other country fought the entire war. No other country went to war, think of this, for the principle of an ally. We only went to war when they attacked us. Soviet Union only went to war when they attacked us. Germany attacked people. Italy attacked people. Japan, not Britain. We only went to war when they attacked us. Soviet Union only went to war when they attacked us. Germany attacked people. Italy attacked people. Japan, not Britain.
British and Canadian forces? Barely mentioned. The Battle of Britain, the moment Hitler was stopped, reduced to a footnote. Meanwhile, other battles get entire chapters. That's not random. That's a rewritten story. And once you see it, you can't ignore it. Let me ask you, who broke the Enigma code? Most people today think America, but it was Britain, Alan Turing. And for decades, that truth was hidden. By the time it came out, the narrative was already set, and history doesn't like corrections. Here's another question. Who fought Hitler alone? When Europe collapsed? When allies were gone? When no one else stepped in? Britain. Just Britain. For 2 full years. No backup? No support? Bombed nightly? Cities burning?
They went for a war for principle. They were brilliantly led. They put 40% of their investment in land, in sea, air, and naval power. They avoided the Somme, the Verdun. They lost the fewest of all the major, 425, less than half what they had lost in World War I, and they fought a much more ambitious war in II. That being said, they mobilized, they mobilized to a degree that was unprecedented, more so in terms of per capita investment than the United States or Soviet Union, and they were flat broke when the war was over.
And still, they didn't surrender. But in school, you probably heard more about Pearl Harbor than the Blitz. Why? Because the story of World War II was shaped later, during the Cold War. And in that version, there were only 2 heroes, America and the Soviet Union. Britain didn't fit the narrative, so it was pushed aside. Not erased, but minimized, turned into a supporting role. Now look at the facts. 1940, France falls in weeks. Europe collapses. One country left standing, Britain. Alone. No allies, no safety net. Just an island, waiting for invasion. Hitler expected surrender. Any rational nation would have. Britain didn't.
The British and their empire outproduced the Soviet Union in every category by itself of war material except tanks, and they got very close in tanks. They created more machine guns, more airframes, more small arms fire, more trucks, more fighter planes than did Germany.
For 2 years, they fought alone. Think about that. 2 years, while others watched, or worse, helped the enemy. And yet, those years are barely mentioned, skipped over like nothing happened. But everything happened, because during that time, Britain fought the Battle of Britain and won, outnumbered, under constant attack. But they held the line. And then they did more than survive. They stopped Hitler for the first time. And that changed the war, because suddenly Germany wasn't unstoppable, and the world had hope again. And here's the crazy part. Most people today can't tell you anything about it, but they know Midway, they know Stalingrad. The battle that saved Western Europe? Barely mentioned. And it gets worse, because while Britain fought in the skies, they were fighting another war, one almost no one talks about, the Battle of the Atlantic. Think about this. How did America and the Soviet Union keep fighting? Weapons, fuel, food, all of it had to cross the ocean through thousands of miles under constant attack. German submarines hunting day and night. So who protected those supply lines? Britain. The Royal Navy. If those routes collapsed,
Supermarine Spitfire was either equal or superior to the Me-109. The Germans never produced a bomber like the Lancaster bomber, and they never produced radar sets or sonar. Most of the sophisticated technology that won the naval war, sonar and radar, came from the British, and most of the cryptology and the intelligence breakthrough came from Britain. In some ways, we would not have won the war the way we did without the British and their empire.
everything collapsed. Britain would starve. The Soviets would run out of supplies. America couldn't reach Europe. The war would be over. But it didn't happen, because Britain held the Atlantic. Convoys survived. Supplies kept flowing. The war continued. And yet, you barely hear about it. No major movies, no spotlight, because it doesn't fit the story. Here's another one. People talk about American industry, factories, production, the arsenal of democracy. All true. But before America even joined, Britain was already doing it, under constant bombing. 1940, 1941. British factories outproducing Germany in aircraft. Think about that. A smaller nation, under attack every night, still producing more. Planes rolling out non-stop, radar systems advancing, shipyards replacing bosses. By the time America entered, Britain was already in full war mode, years ahead. But that part usually skipped. Now let's talk intelligence, because this is where it gets even bigger. Enigma. The code Germany believed was unbreakable. Britain broke it. Not America. Britain. Bletchley Park. Mathematicians working in total secrecy, reading German messages in real time, tracking submarines, predicting movements, knowing plans before they happened. Historians say it shortened the war by years, saved millions of lives. But for decades, people thought Americans did it, because the truth was hidden. And once the wrong story spreads, it sticks. Same with deception. D-Day, the landings at Normandy. There was a massive operation behind it. Fake armies, fake signals, a complete illusion. Designed to fool Hitler. And it worked. German forces waited, in the wrong place, for an attack that never came. That deception, planned by Britain, executed by Britain, saved thousands of lives. But who gets remembered? You already know. And by now, a pattern should be clear. Britain does the work, but doesn't get the credit. And here's where it gets even more interesting. Because this didn't happen by accident. After the war, two superpowers emerged, America and the Soviet Union. And both had reasons to reshape the story. And Britain didn't fit the narrative anymore. If you're honest about World War II, you have to admit this. Britain was already fighting and winning before America even arrived. They held the line, alone, for years. And yet, that part gets pushed aside. D-Day, often told as an American story, but it wasn't. 5 beaches, 2 American, 2 British, 1 Canadian. Nearly half the force, British and Commonwealth. The planning, largely British. The deception, entirely British. And it worked. But that's not the version people remember. Why? Because the story changed after the war. America became the global superpower. And that required a certain narrative. America as the hero, the one who saved the world. Britain complicated that, so its role was reduced. Hollywood told one story, textbooks repeated it, and over time, it became truth. And Britain didn't fight it, because after the war, they needed America for money, for security, for survival. So they stayed quiet and let the story be written. But then came the Soviet version, even more extreme.
In that story, there was only one hero, the Red Army. Everything else barely mattered. The Western Front? A sideshow. D-Day? Almost irrelevant. Britain? Invisible. This wasn't just propaganda. It became education. across an entire region. And even today, that version still exists. So now, you have two dominant stories, one American, one Soviet, and in both, Britain disappears. Not because it didn't matter, but because it didn't fit. And here's where it gets even more subtle. The Commonwealth, millions of soldiers, India, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Africa, fighting under British command. A massive force, global. But after the war, those contributions were split apart, credited individually, which sounds fair until you compare it. Because the Soviet Union counts everyone together. America counts everyone together. But Britain gets divided, piece by piece. And suddenly, it looks smaller, less important, even though it wasn't. That's how the scale gets hidden. Now look at reality. Britain fought everywhere. North Africa, Italy, France, Germany, even Asia. At sea, in the air, every front, the entire war. But the image most people have? A small island, barely surviving, while others did the real fighting. That image is wrong. And nowhere is that clearer than D-Day. Movies focus on Omaha, American heroism, but that's only part of the story. British and Canadian forces faced some of the hardest resistance, advanced further inland, fought just as hard, but got less attention.
Over time, that version stuck and became history, even though it wasn't the full truth, because once a story is repeated enough, people stop questioning it. The invasion of Europe was never just American. It was joint, truly joint. British planning, British intelligence, British innovation, like the floating harbors that made landings possible. But over time, that story changed. America became the hero, the liberator, the one who saved the day. The Soviet Union told its own version, where the West barely mattered, and Britain got squeezed out of both. But here's the part most people don't realize. Britain allowed it. Not because they didn't care, but because they had bigger problems. After the war, Britain was broke. Cities destroyed, empire collapsing. They needed help. American money, American protection, a future. And that came at a cost. The narrative. America wanted to lead the story, and Britain didn't fight it. They stayed quiet, let the movies play, let the textbooks stand, because survival mattered more than credit. There was also something deeper, cultural. Britain doesn't brag, doesn't celebrate loudly, keeps things understated. That works in life, but not in history, because history favors the loud. America had Hollywood. The Soviets had propaganda. Britain had silence, and silence loses. So over time, the story shifted, slowly. Generations asked, memories faded, and Britain's role got smaller, until today, where people genuinely believe they barely mattered. But here's the real cost.
It's not just unfair, it's misleading, because it hides how wars are actually won, not by one nation, not by size alone, but by alliances, coordination, innovation, resilience. Britain proved that, holding the line when defeat seemed certain, outthinking, not just outproducing, building systems that multiplied strength, breaking codes, deceiving enemies, fighting everywhere for 6 straight years. That's the part people forget. And the people who lived it deserve better. The civilians under bombs, the sailors in the Atlantic, the pilots in the skies, the soldiers across continents, and beyond Britain, the Commonwealth, millions of them, from India, Canada, Australia, Africa, New Zealand, all fighting together. One system, one war effort. But afterward, they were split apart, counted separately, made to seem smaller, and that changed the picture. So what's the truth? World War II was never won by one country. It was won by an alliance. Britain, America, the Soviet Union, the Commonwealth, all essential, all necessary, but only some got remembered. And once a story takes hold, it's hard to change, maybe impossible. But now you know. The next time someone says, America and Russia won the war, you'll see what's missing. The country that stood alone, the navy that held the oceans, the air force that stopped Hitler first, the code breakers who changed everything, the planners behind the invasion, the soldiers who fought from start to finish. Britain didn't lose the war, they lost the story, and that is the real tragedy.